Welcome back to Press Club with me, Jenna Ann Gastor, with my co-host this evening, Earl Bousquet. We were just speaking about the water crisis and the cancellation of the H2O wet fet, and Earl was just giving us some good facts as to how important water is and really how bad the crisis is all over the world globally. I'm going to take you from one water crisis, Earl, to another crisis in my belief, which was the shooting of Cheryl Clark on Friday morning. Cheryl Clark on Friday morning. It really hit the people of the graveyard by storm. From what I gathered from interviews is that she was a loved woman. She was a peaceful woman. I mean, that is what they have said to me. However, her family does have a history of being gunned down. Victims. Her husband died just over 2 months ago. She was still in mourning.
11 weeks ago.
You know, what do you really think is going on?
One can only hope that this is not a resurgence of another round in the continuing gang warfare. It has been fatal in the past. We started the year joyous at the end of the third month, having had no homicide in the first 3 months of the year. No one alive could remember such a statistic, and we were clapping hip hip hooray about that, only to have in the following month 6 murders in 5 days. And there was a lull, and we had this terrible incident. And like everybody else, I'm as concerned about what really happened. And my concern is not merely about how she died, where she died, who killed her. We ought not to rush to judgment in situations like that, from the standpoint that I could quite understand somebody like Mr. Richard Frederick or others who have been very close to her, who have had intimate relationships with her over the period of time, insofar as him tributing to her and his other friend, attributing to the two of them the cause. They encourage him to be into politics, but then to proceed and say that she did not do anything to deserve the way in which she was killed would suggest to me that if she was killed in more acceptable circumstances, that, you know, it would have been
what it
yeah
means.
but I'm saying that we have that tendency to spend more time thinking about how somebody got killed than the fact that nobody has a right to kill anybody. Everybody has a right to live, and I think the emphasis now has to be not on how she was killed, but the fact is that we still have people in our society who are prepared to just reduce the value of life to something where you could look at Cheryl Clark and pump innumerable amount of bullets into her. She's alone, I understand, was alone, and it's not about whether she should have been there, whether she should have been alone, you know, whether she should have known she was a target, you know, people suggesting she should have left the country. You know, like, you know, there are people who speak like she brought it onto herself. People have to be free to live and walk in St. Lucia without fear of being attacked, and until we could do and say the things that will help bring that situation around, we'll just be ending up in a situation where you already have people telling you they're not passing on Tracy Road again.
I mean, for me, it's the morale of the whole situation. Me being a woman, to how do you, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, because it could be anybody who shot her down, but how do you look at a woman and just open fire on her
because
like that?
The reason why you asked that question is because you can't, but the reason why you've asked it is because you've realized and you don't want to accept that there are people who can, there are people who can, and they do.
And it's disheartening to know that there are people
and to know that one bullet to the head could have killed
been their mother. I mean, my thing is, when you point the gun and you look at this woman, do you not know this is a woman who has children? This is a mother just like your mother. Would you
not
like
if you're
someone
an assassin.
to
There are people.
But how does St. Lucia, this beautiful paradise that we say we live in, breed assassins? Where are they coming from?
They exist in every single country on earth, and this is not in any way to justify, but they exist in every single country on earth. The number of small arms in St. Lucia has multiplied. The
But
illegal
what
arms.
is the hatred about? What is the hatred about?
The hatred is about, there has to be a basis for the hatred. We might never find out, and that is where the policing and the detective work comes in. It's not just about trying to catch the killers and sentencing them to life imprisonment. It's about being able to look deeper into our society, at the root causes, the sort of things that can cause young people. When we look at the number of persons who have been caught and who have been accused of murder and placed on murder charges and are in court responding to murder charges, we see that it is a generational, there is a generational gap between them and those who are making the assessments, and that is where we have to be careful. I always say to General, let's not measure people with our own yardstick, because it is very easy for us and it's normal. The things that you can't do, you don't think anybody else can do that, but they are. The world is made up of good, bad and ugly, and all in between.
It's good you said that there's a generational gap, and I always believe that these persons in authority that do the strategic planning to, you know, find out what's going on with the youth or whatever, there is a generational gap. The young
Our
generation
planners aren't necessarily as young as the people they're planning for.
So how do you know? How are you in touch with us?
Well,
and they're planning for us. Why not plan with us?
But we have a public service, for example, because
Why
our planners
not
are government, right?
with us?
We have a public service which is structured to ensure that young people never reach the planning status,
until they
because
plan
planning
with
is at
us,
senior levels in the public service, and you only get to be a planner, a senior planner, after years of experience, after you've outgrown your youth and you're only looking for promotion as a salary enhancement.
I'm getting emotional.
No,
the only
no.
way we will have, or we will see some sort of difference in crime amongst the young people in St. Lucia is if they start to plan with us, start to understand where our hate is coming from.
I agree with that.
And why we feel it necessary to go and shoot up some lady, somebody's mother,
Sister
multiple
and
times. And what bothers me now is that that person or persons are still out there.
They will be caught. They will be caught. They will be found. That's how the system
How you know
works.
that? You gonna catch
because there are how many
Are you gonna catch them?
No, the police will. The police
Yeah, because
will.
I thought you had a lead. You said that
No,
so
no,
convincing.
I'm saying that that's how society is. People who commit crimes, and that is not a rule that is written, but I think that in any society, particularly a small society like St. Lucia, nobody, folks, can kill somebody and believe that for the rest of their life nobody will know, because that what happened, the understanding is that it was not only one person involved there. And folks, here's the big secret, is that anytime more than one person knows a secret, it's not a secret. Somebody will talk at some point, and it will happen. The person or persons will be caught. There will be charges laid. I mean, the technology allowed me
And then
between
we will
midnight
be in
and 3
jail
o'clock.
for a number of years before your case is actually heard, and then you might get dismissed because
You get
the
a good
DPP
lawyer.
office
You get
is
a good lawyer
it's
who-
such in a mess that files and files are piling up, and you
No,
never
you
have
get a
enough
good lawyer who finds a technicality.
a technicality, a nice loophole, and boom, they're out again.
To do the same again. But then also one of the reasons the impacts report, when the impacts report came out, there was a lot of discussion as to why a lot of the persons who were killed or who were the police are accused of having killed extrajudicially, there were questions, why are those people still on the streets? And in the discussion, it came up that in one particular case, there was somebody who had been caught with multiple weapons and was on multiple weapon charges, and had been picked up and had been released by a magistrate on $1,200 bail, and that person went out and is alleged to have just continued his business. Now, the ease with which, like I said, lawyers can win cases on the basis of technicalities and not on the basis of the facts of the case is a contributing factor as well. But then we come to the human rights aspect, where every accused has to be regarded as innocent until and unless proven guilty. And it is the job of the lawyer, that's what the lawyer is being paid for. That's what Mary Frances is being paid for, as a defense lawyer, not to determine whether the person was right or wrong, but to see how best
why
she
you
and
have to
others,
put Mary Frances on blast?
Martinez Francois, all the human rights lawyers. In fact, it's the right of a lawyer. And when they don't have a lawyer, Foster, take for example, the Foster, Mr. Kenneth Foster, in the case of the guys in the cathedral case,
right.
Nobody wanted to take the case, and the state cannot have a trial without a lawyer. So the state provided them, which Mr. Lawyer as a Foster. It came at a great cost, but they are still alive on the basis of technicalities having to do that. It took more than 5 years
and
before
they're rejoicing as well.
Huh?
They're rejoicing in this.
Oh yeah, because they might be out in about 5 years because they've been in detention for so long. That has to be considered. And when lifetime is just a little bit of time these days.
When you're on death row or life sentence and you've been reprimanded for 5 years in that, I don't know the technicalities, but I know once you've been there for a certain amount of time, in the courts, in the eyes of the courts, it's they kind of justify it as just as being bad as death row or life, and so now they have to lessen your sentence, and because your court case took so long to be heard. So
that's where the court can be punitive in terms of it punishing in a situation where you have also a move for rehabilitation. It depends on how the society, how the country, how the government, how the laws of the nation regard that person who has been sentenced.
It's interesting that actually we're talking about Cheryl Clark, and yesterday I got a email from Zachary, press relations officer of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, actually sending out a press release on media coverage. They're warning media personnel, me, my fellow colleagues, on how we go about covering certain cases, court cases, criminal cases, who we interview. They might be witnesses that we could be exposing to the criminals. But at the end of the day, we're doing our job as journalists. So now there's a thin line, Earl. How do you feel we as journalists should now go about, because we need our interviews, we need to bring our stories across.
And that is why we do not need to reinvent the wheel. There are rules and regulations governing coverage of cases in court and before court. It is written. It is there, and what we need is the sort of training that will expose particularly the new and young reporters who are not aware. And I saw the press release you're referring to, and it referred you to a particular section of the criminal code or wherever. Go look it up, because it points out, for example, the matter of sub judice. What it is saying basically is that all of those 57 Nepalese students who are here are witnesses.
They are indeed.
And when we go and interview them, we have to be very careful what we ask, because we do not know what they will respond. And therefore they will respond, and they can respond because they're just responding to our questions. So we could ask them a question to which they can respond in a way that can allow either the accused in the Lambert's trial to say, well, you're accusing us of doing that. That person said that was not so in the report. Or the other side could happen. The prosecution can say, well, you are saying one thing, but that is not what the victim said. There is also the other aspect of it having to do with access to and interviewing persons in custody. There is in the weekend press photographs of and interviews with Dr. Infika Shams, who is an accused in court on money laundering, human trafficking, and multiple other charges. You cannot go and interview somebody who is in handcuffs. It is not permitted. But many of the police officers who are accompanying
the gentleman,
the persons from court to the van or wherever, they're swarmed with the TV, they're swarmed with the press, who has a right to ask questions and to expect an answer. But that exchange is not supposed to take place. Now, it cannot be avoided, but on occasions I've read interviews where the authorities have allowed access to Dr. Shams, who has been making comments about the case. And his lawyer, Mr. Foster, has been making comments about the case. So we simply have to be careful what we ask the victims.
Isn't the lawyers, is it fair for me to compare a lawyer's notes to a doctor's notes? You know, when you go to the doctor, everything is confidential. If I am, if you're my lawyer, my attorney, and my information should be confidential as well. So when you have Marcus Foster going on the television and you know, basically
he's being smart. He's making smart use of the press. And this is where we have to be careful, that there are people out there who are aware of the power of the press. They are aware of our power, and therefore they would solicit us to get their word out. Mr. Foster is good at that. He's in all of the press. He's on all of the TV. He's on the social media. I'm not sure whether he's arranging that or whether he's making himself accessible. Because there are lawyers you ask about a case and they won't talk. There are those who do, and we tend to go after those who do. And what can happen now, and we have to be very careful about that, because I think there is an issue in the press this week having to do with different interpretations of a situation. For example, the Secure St. Lucia and National Workers Union.
We have had a lot of refutes, claims, changing of stories in the press, which we will talk about when we come back, because we have to take a break now.